In 2002, a bunch of music tech students at Staffordshire University formed a band called Pilot, and they followed this name over the next couple of years by being called The Pride, and then being called Snowfield, and then finally Editors. So it was 2004 by the time they settled on that name, and flushed with the success of finding a name, they released an album in 2005. It turned out people liked it, so they kept releasing them, and so far they've released 7, and they're still using the same name. Hi, my name's Dan. So this was the debut album by Editors, and I think it's my first encounter with them. They've had a certain amount of success, but I'm not sure I've come across them before. It's possible that I've heard a track or two on the radio. This album reviewed really well, and it's been compared by many people to Echo and the Bunnymen and R.E.M. and U2 for various reasons. And in fact, the first time I listened through this, I worked on a very quick assumption that they were an 80s band. So my process... Those of you who watch all these videos, or many of these videos, know this already. Sorry to be repeating myself. But my process generally is to listen to an album twice. And if it's something that I don't know, I will try and have the first listen as one where I don't actually look up any information first before I start listening, so that I get completely fresh ears on it. Then I usually go and do some digging and reading, and then have a second listen. I found this to be quite a good process. It's good. So my first listen through this, actually, yeah, as I say, I thought that they were an 80s band. Their big, sort of description, kind of what I would think of as big, frantic guitar backing. There's quite a lot of strumming going on at times, and it kind of makes what I think of as a backing curtain of background noise of guitar, but apparently some of that curtain at times is keyboards. I think they've used particularly sounds that might sound like a bit like a scratchy guitar echoed quite a lot anyway. There's certainly bits in some of the tracks where you hear that in isolation, which I think might be the keys. I'm not entirely sure because I don't really pick out stuff that I said, yes, that's definitely keys in here. And then there's lead guitar riffs on that as well, and then there's bass and drums. And there tend to be fairly fast grooves going on, and I use the word grooves deliberately here. That I had to listen through I listened through twice, and then I had a quick flick back through just listening to the different drum patterns. And there's a drum pattern that came out of krautrock that's called the Motorek, which is boom, 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 and it's particularly well suited to rolling music so that it kind of moves on. It keeps this feeling of moving on. Now, I wouldn't say that they've used that pattern more than once, maybe, but actually a lot of the drum patterns are similar and have a similar kind of feel and use the same principles to give this kind of rolling on feel. I would say the drumming's good. Definitely, I was quite impressed with it. The singing, so I think the strongest resemblance to anybody is of Michael Stipe from R.E.M. I think that's why people have picked up on comparisons with R.E.M. here. I think the backing sounds more like Echo and the Bunnymen, or potentially U2 at times. The voice, I would say, is crossed with hints of Neil Hannon from the Divine Comedy as well. There's just little hints of that, I felt. And I feel now like I've just done a whole lot of descriptive stuff that is referring to other music, and I try to avoid that so much. But hopefully some of that will make sense to somebody. Okay. I think my biggest criticism of the album is that it's basically one sound. It's quite effective. And sometimes there's tracks that are slower and have more of an empty feel to them. The last track, Distance, is a bit different from the others. It's got a drum machine sound and all the stuff going on in the background. But mostly, I would say this is kind of like, it feels like a one sound album, and that's, if you like that sound, then that's probably a good thing. The kind of feel and tone of it is pretty serious. The words are apparently deliberately vague, so I don't feel bad about the fact that I didn't pick up any meaning, particularly out of them. They're often quite repetitive. there was a line that I noticed in one of the tracks. I can't even remember which track it was in. Was something like, "When you fall from grace, you fall with such grace," and an interesting kind of play on words. And it's kind of a bit like that, and it's apparently deliberately done in a way to be ambiguous so that people can put their own interpretation onto it, and it is a thing that can work. So I liked it reasonably. I particularly liked the first track, Lights, which has got a nice groove. I liked Fingers in the Factories. I quite like the words in that. I think there may be 3 slower tracks. Open Your Arms was one of the quieter tracks that I liked quite a lot, and it was more menacing. I think how much you like this album will depend on how much you like this sound, because it is so rooted in one sound. I would say I quite like this sound, and so therefore I quite like this album. So that's what I think. I'd love to know what you think. Please talk to me through the comments box. That's it from me for now.
Look up, look up, look up now. It's so long.